In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. And the true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were not born, not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. The poetic words in the prologue to the Gospel of John are not something one would expect to hear on Easter morning. Christmas morning, maybe. The first Sunday after Christmas, always. But Easter, it is certainly unexpected. I wanted us to hear it this morning as a reminder to how this gospel story began. The prologue sets the scene for what is to come, preparing our ears to hear and filling our hearts with hope. The prologue says, the story you are about to encounter is about no ordinary person. This person was there in the beginning of time, creator of all things, creator of life. He was and is the light that will never be overcome by darkness. Those who receive him, who believe in his name, will become children of God. Now, when the Gospel of John was written, the stories of Jesus were already widely known. The Gospels of Mark, Luke, and Matthew had been around 30, 40 plus years, and the epistles, the letters to the churches, they'd been around even longer. It makes me curious as to why a gospel written 60 to 70 years after Jesus' ministry, death, and resurrection would begin with such a prologue. Why choose these opening words? I believe the prologue to John, and maybe the gospel in its entirety, was written as a reminder to something that had been forgotten. Woven into its poetry, we hear the message that all who received Jesus, all who believed in his name, were given the power to become children of God. Had the early followers of Jesus forgotten what it meant to become children of God? What it meant to be unconditionally loved as God's child? Our gospel reading today, we find a hint, a sacred nod to Genesis 1, when light was created out of darkness. Mary, in the darkness of the early morning and in the deep darkness of her grief, finds herself in even more chaos as she sees the stone rolled away from Jesus' grave. This is the first appearance of Mary Magdalene in the Gospel of John. Why is she in such a dark place on a dark morning? Now, if we're familiar with the other gospel accounts, we would know that Mary was one of the recipients of Jesus' healing touch. Mary was once plagued by 7 demons. Those demons would have not only cast Mary out of her own mind, she would have been cast out of society, left alone with her demons to wander in the darkness. In casting out her demons, Jesus not only healed her mind, but restored her life, bringing her back into the light of relationships. Mary has gone to the grave to grieve the loss of one who saved her. Truly saved her. The stone was rolled away, which to her meant the grave robbers had taken Jesus away. With Jesus gone, would her demons return? Or was the light within her, the restoration of her life, eternal? She runs to her newfound family and returns with Peter and the beloved disciple. Now, Peter, who vanished from the story after he denied knowing Jesus for the third time, was now back in the spotlight. He was running towards the grave. I can imagine the shame that was building up with each step. How could I have denied knowing Jesus? I'd loved him. I believed in him. But I left him to die. And now his body's gone. Now the beloved disciple ran with confidence. Was he fueled by a sense of honor and accomplishment? It was he who stood with the women near the cross. It was him who watched his friend and teacher experience the unimaginable pains of crucifixion. It was him who Jesus called out to from the cross when he saw his mother standing beside him, and Jesus said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." And then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. Though Mary Magdalene was the only one Jesus appeared to in the garden that morning, each of these disciples were called to the grave for a reason. Why those three? One who hadn't appeared in the Gospels at all at this point. One who denied Jesus, and one who was Jesus' beloved. Each one represents aspects of ourselves as we gather there with them. In the uncertainty of the darkness, we hear our name. Mary Magdalene, I have a place for you. In your complicated life, that life with your demons, I have a place for you. In your healing friendship and in your faithfulness, in your deep sorrow and unimaginable grief, I have a place for you. Peter, I have a place for you. In your curiosity and in your sense of adventure, in your eagerness to please, I have a place for you. In your denial of knowing me, I have a place for you. My beloved disciple, I have a place for you. In your love and your loyalty, I have a place for you. Jesus gives Mary a message to share with the others. His message ties back to the beginning of the story with the message in the prologue. Jesus said in the prologue, all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God. In the message Jesus sent with Mary, he said, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God. From the beginning of the story to the end, my Father is yours and my God is yours. both you and I are children of God. We're family. In our remembrance, we now join alongside these three disciples who found themselves in the darkness outside the empty tomb. We gather as family, not merely as earthly family with its limitations to wholeness, but as a divine family with our limitless diversity and unconditional unity, knowing that Jesus has called our names and has a place for each of us as we join with him as a light in the darkness to the world. Alleluia, Christ is risen.